Hello, in this short video, I'd like to review how to use AI to design engaging online courses and talk a little bit about the principles and practices of instructional design. What I'm going to do is just what I'd like to do is just lay out a general overview about how we can use generative AI to think about designing a course, and then to show you some examples of how I did that. When we're designing courses, these are four of the things that we attempt to do. So the first is to clarify, right? What are we going to learn? What are the goals and objectives? Once we have that figured out, we want to curate content. Is there existing content? Do I have to make it from scratch? Or are there resources available that I can leverage to use in the course? So generally, we think about immediately, the textbook, any readings that are already in our syllabus. But in online courses, we want to think about multimodality. So that has to do with audio, video content, graphic images like I'm using here, and then really the relevance, right? We don't want to pick content that's sort of, old. So we're looking to curate materials that are resonant for the students and their experiences and what they're currently experiencing, what are current and emerging issues, and so on. The next thing we're going to do is create. Do I need to make content? Are there lectures, handouts, guides, key terms, definitions that will help the students learn? Now, often we think of creating lectures first, but the curation of content really helps us kind of avoid that necessity. We can think about the kinds of content that we're going to create as a way of contextualizing the materials that we've curated and what we hope the students will learn. So if you think of your online course as like a museum exhibit, right, at least a chunk of the course as an exhibit, you have like the big idea, right, the goal of this exhibit, what I hope patrons of the exhibit will get out of it. I then curate artifacts and arrange them in a physical rather than a virtual space. Then I'm creating the contextualizing materials. And that has to do with, the audio tour or the little placards next to the piece of art. So it's helpful to think of it in those terms. We're not building a unit around a lecture. We're building a unit around goals and objectives. Let's ask ChatGPT about the principles of course design. So all of the images in the PowerPoint and all of the images in the course I will design have been made by DALL-E. There are others. Midjourney is very popular, but I'm really sticking with one AI solution for the purposes of this presentation. So here's what ChatGPT had to say. Designing an effective online course requires these consideration of various principles. Here they are. The alignment of objectives and assessments. Alignment is a key component of the Quality Matters rubric. Accessibility, very important. Inclusivity, right? We want to think about universal design for learning. The web content accessibility guidelines. Engagement, interaction. How are students, going to interact with you, each other, the content? Is there flexibility in how students can express, experience, and engage with their learning? What does feedback and support look like? And then we start thinking about like the navigation of the LMS and so on. What kind of technology tools will they use? I mentioned this earlier, right? Relevant content, feedback is related to continuous improvement. Is the learning environment collaborative? Is the content you're using culturally sensitive? Is there some ability for students to direct their own learning? Data privacy concerns, scalability and sustainability, and so on. And this is what it wraps up with. Implementing these principles can help create a robust and effective online learning experience that promotes engagement, inclusivity, and student access. So these are pretty helpful. In a sense, they're very general, right? We can use the large language model to dig into each one of them and say, hey, can you give me an example of, say, engagement and interaction? What are some ways that I could do that? I also then asked ChatGPT to help identify learning objectives on my topic, which is trauma-informed pedagogy. So I'm going to make an online unit about trauma-informed pedagogy. And I asked it to make learning objectives aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. Here are the terms from Bloom's taxonomy here. Here are the learning objectives. And, it sort of works, right? They're time-bound. By the end of this unit, this is what they'll be able to do, right? They'll be able to, and then they'll be able to recall and then list, right? So that's a pretty good learning objective. So let's stop here and pop into Blackboard for a second and see what we have so far. I'm in the student preview of a Blackboard course I created just for this presentation. The course banner I made with DALL-E, it's pretty recognizable as such, as well as this little image here before my learning module or my unit. So here it is, Trauma-Informed Pedagogy. Let's click and see what's what. I want to go to, I made all of these aspects of this unit with the help of artificial intelligence. It took about 2 hours, give or take. I want to start with the learning objectives since I talked about using AI to generate them. So here are the learning objectives. These are the ones aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. I asked for other taxonomies, and here are others. So rather than remember, understand, apply, and so on, I'm getting self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and so on. Let me show you that conversation in ChatGPT. I asked it, right? I'm teaching this week-long unit. I asked it to align the objectives with Bloom's taxonomy. It did so. I then asked ChatGPT if there was another taxonomy that looked at social and emotional learning that could be used to create the learning objectives, and it gave me this. So I used those in the Blackboard course. You can see that they're both here. Now, I would pick among them the ones that I wanted to use. I'm just giving you an example of how it does that. And also, obviously, I would edit, revise, adapt these learning objectives to make them suit my preferences and needs. The next thing I asked ChatGPT to do was to generate a list of key terms. So what are some key terms associated with trauma-informed pedagogy? And I took that list of key terms, obviously, and put it into the Blackboard unit. When I first created this list in Blackboard, you'll notice in the lower right, I got this auto-generate question bank. So now this is Blackboard's artificial intelligence asking me, hey, do you want to make some questions about the content you just uploaded? So I did. And we can see that here in my Trauma-Informed Pedagogy quiz. So I'm going to start the quiz, and here it is. So the Blackboard's artificial intelligence made a quiz using the key terms created by ChatGPT. Now, I told Blackboard the kinds of questions I wanted, how many, and so on. But the point I'm trying to make here is that so far, I have not had to kind of rack my brain to come up with the key terms or the quiz. So that's pretty good as far as it goes. The next thing I asked it to do is come up with podcasts. Can you provide me with links to 3 different podcast episodes about trauma-informed pedagogy? And it did this for me. It gave me 3 podcasts available on Apple Podcasts. Unfortunately, Apple Podcasts require like a subscription, and I didn't want to have to deal with all of that, and I didn't want my students to either. So I said, please find 3 others not on Apple Podcasts. And it did. It found me 3 others. And here they are. I took a look at each of them by clicking that little link, and I uploaded the one I liked the most, which was this one. I like this one the most because it enabled me to both download this episode and also it gave a transcript. So back in Blackboard, I have my Trauma-Informed Pedagogy podcast. Here it is. I created a link to the podcast website, which you just saw. It will also play, because I was able to download it, it will play right in the Blackboard page. And what's most useful in terms of accessibility is that there's an entire transcript of the podcast here that students can download. So now not only is ChatGPT curating content, it's curating content that is accessible and multimodal. I then asked ChatGPT if it could find me a video. So in the interest of more multimodality, I asked it to please link to a video lecture or TED Talk about trauma-informed pedagogy. It said, I found a TED Talk by Dr. Meredith Fox entitled Trauma-Informed Teaching, but it couldn't directly link to it. But I managed to find that exact TED Talk and embed it in the Blackboard site. Here I am in the Blackboard site. There is the title. Here is her TED Talk. I used Panopto to embed it, which will automatically caption it. It'll play right here in the browser. There it is. I used this information available on the under the video on YouTube to post here so the students know what it is and who is this person that's talking. I then asked ChatGPT to find me some articles. And here is its attempt. 3 articles. Now, obviously, we have wonderful online resources at the university library. I'm not suggesting that this is a replacement. I'm simply trying to show how you might use ChatGPT to curate materials. So these are all well and good, but it wasn't super helpful. So luckily, I use another GPT that's an app in ChatGPT called Consensus. The opportunity to get other GPTs, I built one myself called ScyllaSmart. I've shared in the past. This one is called Consensus. Let's take a look at that. I actually have the previous chat right here. So I asked it to do a couple of things. Link to 3 research articles from the past 3 years about trauma-informed pedagogy, and it links to them. Here are the articles. This is in physical education, trauma-informed writing pedagogy, instructional strategies in the Journal of Midwifery. Here are some about professional development. So let's click on the one I ultimately used because I had to look at all of these. And I access the article by clicking this link. And it brings me to Consensus. Consensus does a couple of things, but it gives you a snapshot of the study, which would be the sample size and so on. In order to do that, I'd have to upgrade, so I'm not going to bother with that now. I can actually go to the full text of the article. Here it is. The journal, all of the information I would want. But what's really effective about this is that I get the HTML or the PDF of the entire article. So that's like really useful. So I took that article, and it is now my reading for this unit. I describe what the article is. The students can click on it and get the PDF if they want to, right? Or they can use the link. I also used ChatGPT, or DALL-E in this case, to create this little image. Next is a VoiceThread. So VoiceThread is a discussion and engagement and interactive tool that many of you are probably familiar with. I asked ChatGPT to generate 3 discussion prompts. And here they are. You'll see that I'm not sure that they're that conducive to discussion. They're a bit lengthy, and sometimes there's more than one question in each of them, but they're pretty good. So then I took these questions and I converted them into a voice thread. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's launch that voice thread. Here it is. You can see the questions. I used DALL-E to make the little images on each of the slides. It's a really weird tape measure, but DALL-E did its best. And there you go. I went from 3 questions in ChatGPT to 4. I divided the questions and edited them a little bit. So here's my interaction and engagement. The next part was really helpful, and this is called the "What is this unit about?" So let me show you how I handled that. This was the prompt. Please write an introduction to an online unit. I gave it a list of all of the content, including the voice thread, and it wrote this, "What is this unit about?" We can take a look at that by clicking here. Okay, so let's go back and do a review of this entire little unit on trauma-informed pedagogy, with the understanding that all of the images, all of the text, all of the materials, all of the quiz questions, everything was built by an AI. And with all of the uploading, formatting, creating the PowerPoints, recording this video for you, it all took about, I want to say, between 2 and 3 hours. And that's probably overestimating the amount of time it took. Let's start with, what is this unit about? It gives the students, much like a docent in a museum exhibit, right? What are we going to do here? What's going to happen? A list of everything in this unit. The learning objectives. You remember we have 2 kinds. We're free to mix and match. The key terms associated with trauma-informed pedagogy. A quiz. Based on those key terms. The podcast and the transcript to the podcast. The video, TED Talk, and a description about the speaker. An article, and the opportunity for students to download that article. And a voice thread for discussion and interaction. With the slides, both the images and the discussion prompts made by ChatGPT and DALL-E. So going back to our original conception earlier in this presentation about 4 of the things that we do when we want to design an online unit, module, chunk of the course. Clarify. What are we going to learn? The goal and the objectives. ChatGPT was able to do this very simply. Curate. ChatGPT was able to find me podcasts, videos, and articles, and images. And this would also fall perhaps under the create category, because I was able to use ChatGPT to create a list of key terms, to create the learning objectives. So those could be considered guides. Now, I didn't make a lecture. I certainly could use ChatGPT to create the script for a lecture. And finally, contextualizing. What is this unit about? Making explanations and linkages among the content. So I'm not making an argument that we should replace our own effort with ChatGPT. I'm just trying to show how it can be really helpful in helping us design an online unit in a multimodal way that is more explanatory and scaffolded for a variety of learners. So the question is, can I use ChatGPT to create a lecture? Not should I or would I, but can I? So I asked it, and this has to do with, obviously, step 3, create. So I asked it, create a slideshow that I didn't even spell it correctly, in this unit about trauma-informed pedagogy. The slideshow for your unit has been created. You can download it using the link below. This is the slideshow. I will say it took, 30 seconds. Now, obviously I can ask ChatGPT to give me a script around each of these slides. Now, obviously, it's not formatted. It's weird. It has 2 bullets and numbers. But I guess I would call this a running start, right? Because I can go back to ChatGPT and say, okay, give me a slideshow or give me more slides around the core principles. I can have a slide about safety, a slide about trustworthiness, and so on. So the resource is really incredibly effective in terms of creating content. After putting this together for you, I'm left with the question, how do I feel about this? It's incredibly easy to create this unit, even a slideshow lecture, to curate materials that are, new, relevant, multimedia, podcast, an article, a TED Talk, to create a quiz. So having done this, how do I feel about this unit? I'm not an expert in it. I chose something that I don't really know a lot about, but I thought would be relevant and interesting to explore, something like deeply human, using an artificial intelligence. But I guess I would say I'd want to think more about the rigor of the unit. Lacking the disciplinary expertise, I don't know if there are better resources available. So I'm not sure I can critically engage with what ChatGPT built for me. I would also say that I feel somewhat removed from the unit, as if there were this layer in between me and what I made, in between me and my teaching, in a sense. It lacks a kind of authenticity, and I'm not exactly sure why. Because I engage in many of the same activities, right? Looking, on the internet for multimedia resources, using the library databases to find articles. So what is the real difference there? And it could be that I'm not deploying my own critical faculties to evaluate the material. I didn't do that in this case in any deep and meaningful way, which I might do with a topic that I'm more expert in, if that's the right way to describe it. But I think that these tools are available, and I can't say yet the degree frequency, intensity with which I will use them. But I think we need to engage with them as teachers, as educators, because the students will, and the world will, ultimately, the world for which we're preparing the students. Anyway, thank you very much for engaging with this content. I hope you found it useful and interesting.